Well, folks, here again for the weekly forecast. Before we get to the main forecast, let's take a retrospective look at this last week. Scattered thunderstorms were almost a daily occurrence across the state. And unfortunately, the models didn't do a very good job in terms of the placement. We did see some locations that did see some beneficial rains. A lot of locations did not. The best locations for precipitation in this last 7-day period was north central Nebraska, northeast Nebraska, and portions of south central southwestern Nebraska, and a few isolated spots in the Panhandle. Once you moved east of these regions, very widely scattered thunderstorms with some hit and miss areas, nothing to up to a half an inch. The highest precipitation total during a 24-hour period in this last 7-day period was with a thunderstorm that moved through the O'Neill area, where over 4 inches of rainfall was recorded within a 24-hour period. Now, as we move to the south, this is where the real activity has been consistent. We've seen one thunderstorm complex after another move through Kansas. And in fact, if you look over this last 2 weeks, central Kansas through eastern Kansas has received anywhere from 8 to upwards of 15 inches of moisture during this period. So most of the drought signature has been gone in this region. And in fact, in Nebraska, the drought signature, at least for the D4 conditions, has been removed from the sandhills. And we have seen some easing of conditions across portions of south central Nebraska, but we're starting to see an increase in the intensity across extreme eastern Nebraska. Do we have more moisture in the forecast? Let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we have in store. And as we go to the models, you'll see that this persistent pattern of this trough of the Great Lakes and this ridge to our south, and of course the battle zone is between these two regions. So for today, we're looking at the storms running through around the periphery of this ridge, and that would take into consideration northeastern Nebraska as the best bet for thunderstorm activity, and some of that may sag down into east central Nebraska during the overnight hours. Now as we go into tomorrow, we'll see that ridge trying to push a little bit farther toward the north, so most of that activity will run through the Dakotas and Iowa with just a slight tendency to see some of that activity developing across northeastern Nebraska. As we go into Monday, we're going to try to see that ridge supplants itself a little bit farther to the south as this upper air trough tries to build backwards, and that means the main storm activity right now is designated across northern Kansas and also portions of southern Nebraska. This does look like to be the best widespread chance for precipitation statewide. And then as we go into the day on Tuesday, we'll see another piece of energy sagging from the southwestern part of the state through northeastern and east central Kansas. Some of that activity may make it into extreme southeastern Nebraska, but as we get to Wednesday, the ridge starts building in, and most of the activity, isolated nature, will be shunted into northeastern and eastern Nebraska, leaving a lot of western Nebraska high and dry. By the time we get to Thursday, the ridge stays in place, so the warm conditions remain in this region, and cooler conditions toward eastern Nebraska with just a slight chance of isolated thunderstorm activity. Then once again, as we get into Friday, not much change in that position, and it looks like most of the activity will remain in western Nebraska. So the temperatures will remain consistently in the upper 70s, low 80s across eastern Nebraska, upper 80s to low 90s across western Nebraska. In terms of the temperatures, below normal temperatures from next Thursday through the following Tuesday. In terms of precipitation, mostly above normal moisture moves to our east.